Yeah, I think we can start. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Professor, you're audible.
I think this session is about understanding the concept behind lean startup and minimum viable product and business. And in other words, we are talking about how to create radically successful products and businesses in less time and using less resources. So, why this lean concept came in? So, we'll go into a bit of a genesis there. Too precious a resource to waste, and therefore guaranteeing the success of any startup. There are a lot of concepts have been floated. So lean startup is one of them. It does, while it doesn't answer the requirement 100%, but it does tell you maybe one of the better ways to bring about success to your startup. So if you understand the mindset of an entrepreneur and a manager, they are quite at odds in terms of structure and strategies. Entrepreneurs are wary of implementing traditional management practices, and they are afraid that they will invite bureaucracy and stifle creativity. But what happens is they get caught up into the management systems, and then it's the issue of fitting the square peg into the round hole of general management.
Professor, please unmute. Professor, we can't hear you. Please unmute.
So we are talking about that investor validated plan, and the entrepreneur just goes ahead. So there are a lot of words here, but I think what we need to basically understand here is after launching, the entrepreneur realizes that the customers have not flocked to the product in great numbers. And by that time, because the investors had cleared the proposal, some good amount of money has already been invested in infrastructure, hiring, and support. So, what has happened is just by going by that idea, you have successfully, faithfully, and rigorously executed a plan which was utterly flawed. So, this is the kind of situation we are going to try and rectify today by using the lean startup concepts. So, the person, Eric Ries is the prime father of that lean startup methodology, and I think he did a study of over 2 decades where we looked at the failures of various startup, and the reason from top to bottom are like this. There's no market mean. This accounts for 42% of the startup failures. Ran out of cash is another 29%. Not the right team, 23%. Then outcompeted. The competition strategy or the counter strategies were not anticipated in advance, well thought out. Then price and cost issues is another 18%. Product not properly thought out, that is another 17%. And need of and lack of business model, that is 17%. The whole host of reasons. And I think barring the first 8 or 10, 9 reasons, they are all fairly well distributed. So I think we look at the major reasons which are almost like the top 10, which will account for more than 60-70% of the failure rates. So what is the significance of lean startup in context of entrepreneurship? So it is about iterating and improvising the solution. There's a concept of fail fast. Basically, the idea is to apply conscious thought to each product feature, and but you just go ahead and assess the customer market and need and put your first iteration of the product in the market. And it may well happen that the customer feedback comes in, but the idea is to needs, and you iterate fast enough, and the number of iterations can be many, but the speed is very important here. The concept is, if we don't fail fast, we don't learn fast, and we won't be necessarily directing our attention elsewhere to improve the solution. So we have to look at the current solution, why exactly it failed, and what is the modifications required. Whenever we do this, obviously we do it at a small enough scale, and we spend a minimal amount of money, and we make sure we don't run out of cash. So what are the decades of learnings from startups which has been put into lean startup? So business plans rarely survive first contact with the customer. So as Tyson famously said, that everybody has a strategy, but until they get punched in the mouth. What it means is the punch in the mouth is meeting your challenge, which is really your customer and the market. When you go there, you think you might have thought out your product and service very well, but you go to the market and doesn't take off. Lesson two is nobody does a 5 year plan for complete unknowns. So you don't do a strategy planning and total planning, product planning, and look at the market and forecast what is going to be the revenue and such things. So that typically in a startup may not happen, especially when you are starting with a new idea or a new product. Third lesson is startups are not a smaller version of large companies, so they don't unfold according with the market master plan. So that's another reason from lesson two not to go into very elaborate planning, which may or may not happen. So the startups which succeed are the ones which quickly go from failure to failure, all the while you adapt. And this is what I think in the earlier session also you have heard about. So it's all about understanding customer need and adapting very fast, iterating very fast, and failing fast, and but learning the lessons at the same time. So what is your speed of failing and improvement? That is what counts. So other thing is, in terms of a lean startup is to, you have to test a hypothesis, and this product hypothesis you have to measure the success in terms of very clear metrics, not superficial metrics. So if you take example of Facebook, for example, so if you see number of likes and total accounts created on Facebook, they will be only vanity metrics. But the true value and stickiness of platform is an average amount of time your customer spends on Facebook per day per user. So this metric gives a deeper understanding of user engagement. And that is what will tell you, in a platform like Facebook, user engagement is everything. So the amount of time your customer spends on the platform, that becomes the most significant metric. So in lean startup, while you're doing iteration fast, failing fast, learning fast, the metric has to be defined very well. The other thing is how many of those users again come back to the platform. So what we call about in advertisements, advertising you call it recall rate, but here we are talking about customer coming back to reuse the product maybe every single day or very often and spend more hours. So that is a measure of how much they value that product. So this I'll not detail. We are sort of covered it, but basically the genesis of Lean Startup happened because uh, one Shikhar Ghosh of Harvard Business School, he showed that 75% of most startups fail. So that has given a lot of thought, saying that why the traditional concept of going all, having a total go at the market with all you have got does not work. So Lean Startup, what are the three factors which make the startup process less risky? So it favors experimentation over elaborate planning. So you quickly get into that and actually started experimenting with your customers in the real market, maybe on a smaller scale, and slowly you enlarge. But you fail fast again. The fail fast, learn fast. That concept is key to your lean startup methodology. Customer feedback matters more than the intuition. Now the customer, your intuition may say professionally what is the best feature in the product where customer will derive value. But when you're a startup, you're only looking at the customer feedback, not the value you get about customer delight, but what the customer will be willing to pay for because that's where your revenue streams are coming. So that's another factor which goes in favor of lean startup. Third is about iterative design over a traditional big design. So you don't invest a lot of resources and the big design, you don't hire consultants. You do iteratively yourself, learn your lessons, maybe your team. They go and sit with the customer and get the feedback, and in the next iteration, you improve the product. So I think uh, these you have to read through. I'm not going to detail much, but I think the startup solution, which is there at the back, that becomes more important. But here it's all about concentration of expertise in how to build startups. And again in US, it was found in pockets in East and West Coast where this methodology was being used more successfully than other parts. Most of Europe then started using it, and the lean concept itself originated from Japan. But in terms of business development, the Japanese concept was more used in USA and then slowly gained traction in India. So fallacies about typical four steps of most startups. Again, we have discussed, so I'll not repeat it again. Developers invest a lot of man hours to get ready for launch without customer input. So that is the key point. If you are putting any investment, or even if your investment is cleared by your investors, without sensing the market and really understanding the customer feedback and inputs, then the venture doesn't take off as expected. So this is the final picture where, instead of writing an intricate business plan, the founder summarizes the hypothesis in a framework called business model canvas. And then that canvas is taken to the customer and inputs taken. So that's how what happens in the lean startup methodology. I'm sorry, I'm going to rush through some of these things because there's a lot of elaboration, but this how the lean methodology came in. That is very important to understand why it came in. And that's what it's all about here. Now, in India, the lean startup happened long back, and lean and agile development came into the IT services long back, basically because it is quite replicable. In an IT service, what happens in one part of the world can easily be replicated in another part of the world. This cannot happen so much with other products and services. And here, with less social security, what is happening? Lean startup, while in other spheres it didn't take off as well, is because there's a taboo against failures in our culture. So failing early and failing often is not taken positively at a social level. So these are the things I think which came. against the lean startup methodology taking off in a big way. But happily, these reasons are slowly fading away, and some attitude reorientation is taking place in society, management, as well as in the market. So, this is a box of lean startup. These are the questions you need to ask yourself before you take off. And who are the key partners? Who are our key suppliers? Who are the key resources we are acquiring from our partners? And what key activities our partners will perform? Key activities, what key activities do our value propositions require? Our distribution channels, customer relationships, revenue streams. So we can look at other things later, the channels, customer relations, and everything. But more importantly, that comes later. How do we keep and grow customer relationships? But I think the key point here is the value proposition. What value do we deliver to the customer? Which one of our customers' problem we are helping to solve? What bundles of products and services are we offering to each segment? Which customer needs we are satisfying? And what is the minimum viable product? The minimum viable product is something we'll look at in the next few slides. But the value proposition is the center of lean startup methodology. The value proposition is to be defined, ratified with the customer feedback taken and incorporated. So the lean startup methodology again started in manufacturing, where and product development, where you build a product, measure and learn. So it's a build, measure, learn cycle. And when you build, you look at build only a minimum viable product. You don't waste your resources, especially your finances. And then you measure that your MVP is alive and kicking with your early adopters. So you test it in a small market, small segment of your market, and get the feedback, maybe fine tune it. And that is the learning phase as you fine tune and iterate and bring on the next better version of your product or service. So, three principles which will help through this build, measure, learn loop is listen to the customers. So, you look for a model that will work. If the customer feedback reveals that the hypothesis is wrong, then you either revise them, or the concept called pivot. Again, we look, we pivot to a new hypothesis. We totally reorient ourselves. So we'll look at about pivoting later on. The bottom line is we must learn what the customer really wants, not what they want or what we think they should want. So these are the places where you have to go over your fancies and your, maybe in some ways, your ego or your center. The product becomes so core to you that you start, you cannot ever think of changing that product or service. But that is not important. What the customer really wants, what the feedback comes in, that becomes very important. Second, learning stage, important process or anchor of lean startup methodology is discover customers, create customer, build company. So we have a model hypothesis. You create a minimum viable product, then the proposed solution goes to customer. So after customer validation, that's the box number 2 you see. If the customer doesn't validate, it comes back again to customer discovery. The customer discovery is not about discovering a new customer or new customer segment, but to really understand what customer wants. The customer is nothing but the needs of the customer. So you validate, again you go into this loop till you are fairly sure customer validation says okay, then only you move from box 2, the search box, you come to the execution domain, where you do customer creation. That's box number 3 you see here, and box number 4, which is building the company around the customer. So startups, once the customer creation has happened, then you rapidly ramp up marketing and sales spending, and you do the scaling up of the business. The whole concept is about validating the customer interest early on. So that's the first domain of search. Then you go into agile development, and this is something which started in software industry. So agile development works hand in hand with the customer development. So while you are developing the product, you parallelly get the feedback, and you don't wait till the next iteration of build, measure, learn loop straight away parallelly incorporated iteratively and incrementally as the process doing. So whatever is feasible, don't lose time. You incorporate it in middle of the product development process itself. So this is the process by which startups create minimum viable products that they test. So again, one fundamental of lean startup and agile development is quick responsive development, short repeat cycles. Like I said, fail fast, learn fast. So these are simple concepts, and if you hold on to that in all sincerity and honesty, then the lean startup methodology delivers what it says, the minimum viable product, which is acceptable to your customers. So here we talk about ideas that you go to build, then you build a product, then measure using data or customer feedback, and then you learn. And again, this loop goes on till you exit it and everything is set. You know that there are no further changes required in your product, then you exit this build, measure, learn loop. So this is the same thing I'm repeating over several slides so that the basic idea gets into set in your mind. So just a brief comparison between lean and traditional. So you see in traditional is business driven, hypothesis driven. In lean, and in traditional it is business plan implementation driven. So in traditional thing, you assume that the plan is correct and just go ahead with the implementation. You are not worried about the resources wasted on the way. So lean takes care of that. In new product process, I'll only look at the things outlined in red, which is the lean strategy. Customer development, get out of the office and test the hypothesis. So it's not an armchair kind of testing in lean. You actually have to go to the market and test out the product with the customers. You are intending to be the early adopters and scale it up based on that market. Then in engineering, you talk about agile development, build the product iteratively and incrementally. Uh, and then you talk about financial metrics that matter: customer acquisition cost, lifetime customer value, churn, and viralness. Viralness is how much the customer would, by word of mouth promote your product, and how fast, to how many people, and that viralness is what is going to grow your market. So again, lean startup practices are not just for young tech ventures. They hold good. Big companies have used it. I think my voice got lost. Maybe I'm clearer now.
Yes, Professor.
Yeah.
You're audible.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I think the Wi-Fi is a bit unstable here. So I think if you see big companies like General Electric, Qualcomm, Intuit, they all learned this from the smaller startups, and then they started implementing lean startup in their new product launches. So therefore, the small startups need to think what the lean startup practice MVPs they need to adopt for a differentiated strategy, their own USPs, and then they have to create their own competitive barriers to save themselves from the big companies. So having talked about all this, we looked at fail fast, learn fast, build, measure, learn, loop, and what are the care to be taken. So then, what is the minimum viable product which we have been discussing so long? The minimum viable product is a basic model of a product as simple as possible with only core features that cater to the audience needs. So that's the definition. So this, in simple terms, this is what it says. So this product provides the team with maximum amount of validated learning with the least effort. So in other words, MVP concept is a lean startup value proposition that customers respond to. So while it's a basic version, it will still have apps core value, workability, usability, visual appeal. So nothing is missed here. So this product is as good as your product with bells and whistles. So that's what is MVP is all about. So what does it gain in lean startup thing? You have minimum effort and least amount of development time. And also you invest less into developing the product that is ready for launch. So in case the definition was not getting into your head, then this is the something to look at. So this is an example of a donut. So product design is here, and you see here the ultimate product, the you can say the product at the premium level, but MVP can be just this. And MVP does not need, maybe if your customer feedback says they're not bothered about the multiple flavors and colors. Color is not the main, you know, attractive proposition to them, but maybe it is more in terms of filling up their carbohydrates and nutrition. Then the donuts MVP is something which you see in the middle of the picture. So workability, usability, yes, visually may not be as appealing as the final product, but probably their customer feedback says that no, customer goes by the taste and appearance, but not as much by the frills and colors. So then this MVP starts. So this is the basic idea of MVP. I thought I'll illustrate through a donut. So why is it important for a startup to focus on MVP? Because you know little about the market where you're going to launch the product. You think they are your customers, but as you develop the product, you may realize, as we'll see later, that your product market itself has shifted. So that could be another reason, and that is something to do with what we call pivoting, which will again come to what functionalities product should have, what is your target audience, what value proposition works best. So what works best, again there are measures to do that, we'll see later. So let me go a bit quickly over this because I think we have limited time, but I think when we go there you'll clearly understand how to measure what value proposition works best and how much your customers are willing to pay for your product. So these are the key points which your lean startup methodology and MVP need to address. So benefits of a MVP in lean, what are the benefits? You reduce product features. So what happens is you have less number of variables, so you get a more reliable feedback from users. You create a user base and a community of customers around the product. Shift the focus to users because in the end it's all about them. So the product is somewhat simplified. So the user will be very clear and accurate in their feedback because their attention is also not distracted. Only the key features and benefits they will be looking at. You develop a product with the least amount of effort. So again, it's the same loop. So don't maybe the diagram on the right may not be as clear, but again, it talks about the cycles as you go from one evaluation to another. It's the same planning, testing, evaluation, or build, measure, learn loop, and it shows how you go start from here and then go to the next loop, and then you come out with the minimum viable product. But the example on the left talks about two Stanford students who wanted to build a robotic lawn mower for commercial spaces. So their initial customer target was golf courses, private golf courses, where they thought the manpower is not easily available and why not use this. As they began talking to the farmers, then they realized that the need, in fact, more than the golf course, the amount, numbers they could sell and usability and benefits really automatic, weed killer, and which is driven by itself. It's an autonomous kind of a weed killer, and then this prototype was tested, and 9 months, within 9 months, because this is the strength of identifying the product market and your customer need correctly. So here the product market itself shifted from golf courses to farmers, and then within 9 months they got 3 million in venture funding, and the product got launched within 9 months. I hope my audio is still on.
You're audible, Professor.
Right. Observe, but don't ask. So only put analysis and look at the adaptability. So these are the three core elements you need to consider. So what is product market fit and why it's important for MVP? Because the market you would have sensed, your product and market may not be the same, which the product features are enabled, or you are enabled a product feature and the your product the customer segment you're looking at it is not actually wanting that feature. So it is a so product market fit means that there's a sufficient demand in ROI terms, that there's a clearly defined marketplace for a product and a clearly defined value proposition to allow efficient human or financial capital expenditure to scale value creation. So those are one line definitions, somewhat complicated, but anyway, I'm sharing the PowerPoint with you people, and as you read through, you'll understand what defines a good product market fit. And then there are some data visualization where you can do some simulation techniques. Here we have used my Monte Carlo, and then it looks at, you can create a histogram and or a hurricane graph of potential outcomes, which tells you the probability of hitting the product or market right. So purpose of MVP is to understand, as we said, the problems faced by customer and what they're willing to pay for. So there are different types of MVPs. So you can create videos which release in the media to understand taste of customers, and that'll give you idea of product appreciation of public needs. There's something called concierge MVP where you look at, you focus on few customers and develop a product according to their needs. Then there's a Wizard of Oz MVP. And this basically, here you don't invest anything. You start with zero investment, but you pretend that the product has been developed. Maybe you create a virtual kind of a fraud product on a and share it with the customer, and gives a fancy technical solution to the issues faced by customers earlier. So you take this info on a face-to-face customer engagement and then use that feedback to find out if product is something that customers need. So here in the last Wizard of Oz MVP, you have not invested anything, but you are still taking feedback from the market. So once you get the validated learnings from and problems faced by customer, what they're willing to pay for, you look at the engines which drive the model. One is the sticky engine to attract the customer for a long-term period. Repeat purchase companies use this kind of model. Then there's a viral engine. So something which focuses on customer, customer cannot keep to himself or herself, and they will talk to other customers on the social platforms, and this is how the viral spread will happen. So these are all elements of product design. So when we talk about design thinking and other concepts, you build these kinds of things in the product itself. And then you talk about the paid engine. So paid marketing strategies. So here you look at lifetime value of the customer and profitability of the customer over the lifetime. Then you have one more concept called innovation accounting. There are a lot of small concepts, but once you read through the PowerPoint, I think a lot of fundamentals will fall into place. So one is you have to establish the baseline. So build, measure, learn cycle. If the initial numbers are unfavorable, it serves as the right starting point. Then tune the engine. Avoid making multiple changes at once. Instead, concentrate on one particular aspect, which is the key aspect. So this incremental kind of improvement in the product is something which is very typical to lean startup methodology. And again, you proceed with caution when fine tuning, testing one hypothesis at a time. Pivot or persevere. So if you're not making progress, you'll know from the small learning steps that you have taken along the way that something needs to be changed. So this the crossroad which you'll face when you start coming out of that build, measure, learn loop, and at a particular stop, you'll think that either you're thinking things are more or less going along the expected way, then you persevere with your solution and product, but where you think the unexpected results are coming in and you start sensing that customer need is something totally different, or the customer need has changed, or you need to look at a totally different customer market itself, so then you have to pivot. So pivot or preserve, this is the key turning point in lean startup methodology, where the entrepreneur has to face a challenge with his business and has to decide whether they are going to keep pushing forward the same direction, or scale it up, or change course and revise the project. So again, I'll not get into a lot of words here, but basically what we are doing in this situation is whether you are pivoting or preserving, you're changing your strategy without changing your vision. So you would not, should not feel very uncomfortable that I started with something and now things have totally changed. But your basic vision of creating a product with some key benefits, only that vision will remain. Or you'll say the benefits have changed. So my strategy is always to create benefits which will be meaningful to customer. So in that sense, also your vision is unchanged. So again, this thing, the build measure cycle, the loop finally, once you exit the loop, as we saw, maybe after several iterations, then you come to this decision block which is in green, and if you persevere, then you go back into the build, measure, learn loop. That doesn't mean the product needs improvement. Maybe you persevere with the same product until some situation or feedback tells you that yes, you need to change. So persevere means you go back into the build, measure, learn loop. Pivot means you exit the loop and then you start again looking at your product differently, and maybe you totally redesign the product or bring in new features or take out some other features. So pivoting is that. So at the end of your build, measure, loop, the decision point, this is another way of looking at it. So if you are tasting success, you'll persevere, you'll go on this route where you scale up, rewards are waiting for you. Or if you are here, then you'll pivot. But while pivoting, you don't see any kind of uh, feasible options, then that's where you'll stop and you'll kill the idea or product there, and maybe as an entrepreneur, you'll start looking at another idea. But pivoting is very much possible, and it doesn't mean this is the end of the road. So we'll look at pivoting in some more details. So pivot is what differentiates success stories from failures. Basically, there are tools to discover which parts of the plans were working brilliantly, which are misguided, and then you change your strategies. So adapting strategies is very important. Why pivoting is important and yet not practiced? Because founders and entrepreneurs become emotionally attached to their products. So they invest their lot of emotions, time, money, and then they don't want to be sidetracked. So these are all, and they also get into vanity metrics, which we saw in case of Facebook. So vanity metrics is not how many customers have enrolled into Facebook, but how much time they spend day after day on the Facebook, and what are the how many connects they make. So those metrics are more meaningful. So again, you're testing the wrong hypothesis and you're leading your teams astray if you don't go by vanity metrics. So it is crucial to analyze every aspect before launching and testing the water. So when you launch or you scale up, that's the time lot of resources and finances will be pumped in. And that's the time you have to really test the water, be doubly sure what you want to do. Now, these are some 9 techniques which a lot of startup, the wise men in the startup domain, they have come up with. And this has been practiced, and very important to have at least fortnightly, if not more frequent meetings with your team. And then these are the tools used, brainstorming, which helps to consider alternatives in response to learning, collaborative games, decision analysis, facilitation, focus group, lessons learned, retrospective, observation, prototyping, and risk analysis. So if you see, there are 3 columns here: build, measure, learn. And only when it comes to the final list of risk analysis and management, all the three have to be analyzed, and that decides that you come out of that build, measure, learn loop. Otherwise, you continue the same way. Same thing goes for observation. Now, we look at, for example, focus groups. The focus groups, again, the build component is not there, only measure and learn. That happens in the focus groups when you meet the customers. And if you look at collaborative games, there, when you're building, then there's a collaborative game ideation and generation of alternatives triggered by learning. So that'll happen in collaborative games, both learn and build, but there's no measurement there because here you're doing some kind of a creative gameplay. So you're not measuring, you're not constraining the participants from their creative ideation. So this table you'll have to study a bit, but I think that gives you a good structure that in which phase they are available to you and which gives better results. The other way to look at your future of your new product or new startup or MVP, the way it's going is what is called a hurricane chart. So here what you do is the entire market segment you divide. So these are all revenue streams over time multiplied. So revenue streams are nothing but the price which the customers will pay for your product into number of customers. So you see highly unlikely, that's on red. So obviously there's a higher price end. Similarly, there's a low price end which is also in red. So these are all colors of rainbow. The red is the defines the limit. And when you come to orange, again that is unlikely. Is the yellow and green band, 2 yellow bands and green band, which is likely and possible. And this is how you can expect your business to scale up. And this is the point where revenue shoot up, and this is where probably you do your launch and pump in the resources and scale up. So hurricane chart is one way of data visualization which will tell you over time what is going to happen to your business. Other way is the histogram, again the same data plotted differently. Here it tells you that how often you are hitting the jackpot and to what extent. So 16% of the time, again here is the highest revenue, but will be the height of the bar also reflects in histogram the most frequent kind of hits. So you're going to hit this revenue about 14% of the time, this revenue 12% of the time, this revenue 7% of the time. So this is the way to look at a histogram. So again, using all these tools and visualization, you decide success criteria for your business and your hypothesis. So your specific impact, certain time, and with a specific probability. So if you look at an example, you can't, if somebody says this project is ready to scale, if I can reach 10 crores in revenue, or it reduces carbon, they they cannot be your success criteria. So success should be defined in terms of impact, time, and probability. So this is what I put in bold here. So the 60 greater than 60% probability that we earn 10 crores in revenue in 5 years. That's a definitive statement. 75% probability that we'll have our carbon footprint within We'll halve our carbon footprint in 2 years. So that's again definitive. So these success criteria you have to set up for your business, somewhat challenging but achievable, practical, and realistic. So without goals and deadlines, the probability of success, we can't declare success and begin to scale. So that is another aspect you need to look at. So pivots, there are different pivots. So I think we have a small time. So I just put one line description. I hopefully it doesn't confuse you, but gives you an idea that you can do pivoting in a different way. So you reach a point in that decision diagram after build, measure, learn, do that no, so the product is not moving along expected lines. So you not persevere but pivot. So when you are pivoting, then there's a zoom in pivot. A single feature in the product becomes the entire product. So this is, again, we'll see some example further down the line in case of YouTube, for example. Zoom out, pivot, the whole product becomes a single feature in something much larger. So here it could be something like your chip. Suppose there's a new chip which goes in your mobile and the performance goes up many-fold. So the for the chip person, zoom out pivot. Suppose you are marketing that mobile, then the single feature is your chip in that mobile phone. Customer segment pivot, product was right, but original customer segment wasn't. So this is the case we looked at of robotic lawnmower. They moved away from golf courses and went into automatic, weedicide for farmers. But the basic product essentially remained the same. Only the frills change. Customer need pivot. So customer need pivot is also in some ways. What is the customer need pivot is basically, again, YouTube example, when we see, will become clear to you. The need of the customer is something else, and YouTube started sensing the need as something else. Platform pivot, you start out as an application, but due to success, it becomes a platform ecosystem. So here we can think of Microsoft, we can think of Google, we can think of Apple ecosystems. So then there are pivots and pivots, different variations of pivot. Business architecture pivot. So you switch from high margin, low volume to low margin and high volume. That's one kind of pivot you can have, where you look at various customer segments and then decide which particular segment you want to capture. Value capture, changing the how the values capture fundamentally changes everything in the business. So the value capture, here I think you can take example of Shopify, where they started. They found the products on e-commerce market are not very good, so they created a shop architecture model. So finally, they designed, they digitized various e-commerce shops into something which is more presentable on their website, and that became their business. So lean startup, again, I'll not get into this because it's talking about single piece flow. So basically, this slide talks about how the concept came from lean manufacturing concepts into business and into lean startups. So it's all about single piece flow. So like we said that till that first iteration cycle is over, you don't go to the second iteration. So the single piece flow also means that till this operation is over, it's not, the piece is not ready for the next operation. And here again, the individual performance is not as crucial as overall performance of the system. So this is again something taken from Japanese philosophy of management. Small batches, working in small batches. So like we said, we do testing using small prototypes and use small test markets so that less resources are spent. So there's something about Toyota and Kurt. If something is going wrong, anybody in the team, right from the top person to the worker on the line, if they notice any problem anywhere around them and they think it could lead to some product defect or unhappiness in the with the customers, then they just Anton is a name for the bell, the cord which you pull and it rings a bell. And in the earlier times when Toyota introduced, the bell will be rung and the entire production line will be stopped till that is set right. I'll not detail on this. This I think you can read at leisure, but this is the basic concept. So anybody in the team is empowered to stop if things are going the wrong way. So then there's another Japanese concept of continuous deployment. So this is about IMU one website where they upgrade. We know the mobile apps, they get, the next version, they get updated once in a week or once in a month. Sometimes they don't get updated for 6 months or 2 years. But here, this is a case where the continuous and rapid improvement was happening, and they are doing 50 updates on their software in the test scripts per day. And this led to a total of 15,000 test scripts, which will take care of various user actions. And this is another reason where the product was continuously deployed and succeeded. I'll not spend too much on Kanban. Again, you have to read it and you have to be a bit familiar with the concept. But basically, you shift in Kanban, you shift measuring productivity based on customers' validated learning rather than the quantity of new features developed. So it's not that the work you have put in, how much of customers' likings you have put into the product. That defines the productivity in a Kanban system. I think the five whys basically, I'll just talk about the five whys and the details you can see later. So these are the questions. Five whys are the questions which you should ask when you get into the lean startup methodology. So a new release disabled a feature for the customer. Why? Because a particular server failed. Why did this? This is of course from IT. So you're talking about a server-based software. Why did the server fail? Because obscure system subsystem was used in the wrong way. Why was it used in the wrong way? Because the engineer used it, didn't know how to use it properly. Why didn't he know? Because he was never trained. Why wasn't he trained? Because his manager doesn't believe in training. So the whole thing is when you ask the five whys, the question is each of the why takes on from the previous question, and once you have done the five whys, you get to the depth of the problem, the root reason why something did not work. So this is the basic essence of five whys. So another concept apart from Eric Ries, the Steve Blank concept, where he talks about 4 steps to epiphany. That means testing assumptions, using customer feedback, and enhancing the speed of product iteration. Should be all rigorously explored and discussed within the team. This is the basic concept. And if you follow these steps, and then this leads to a very validated product which will be useful to the customer. The success story of General Electric, where they brought in a new battery called Durathon. It's a product extension, but they decided to use the lean startup methodology there, where the team members went to customers and listened to customer issues, and then they also dug deep to understand how customer bought industrial batteries, how often they used it, and the operating conditions. So here they realized that the initial, this is another pivot they did, whereas the market pivot, where they said the initial target segment is data center, but they should not be focusing on that. They should be focusing this battery on utilities. So it goes to more of the things where they realize that most of the telecom services are failing in US at that time because of unreliable electric grid. And then they we invested 100 million to build a world-class battery, created a new manufacturing facility which opened in 2012, and now they have a backlog supplying batteries to utilities. I think I'll go to the case of YouTube because Google use Facebook and YouTube. So let's look at lean canvas for ideation in case of YouTube. So YouTube, as it started, it was a it started in a apartment. uh, Matchmaking services and something like online dating services, which was called Hot or Not by another competitor. So Users could upload short videos to describe the ideal partner and browse for potential matches. So here again, you see the pivot. That particular idea didn't take off, and then they realized that you have to just do video hosting. So you look at the unique value proposition here. The solution: create a website devoted to amateur videos, and then unique USP is the people's TV service, watch and share video content on a single platform, star-based rating system, and that way it became the next flicker of video. And finally, I think Sequoia Capital financed them for 3.5 million, and I think something like 65 million Google had to buy the YouTube because they could not let that idea go. So, what do we learn from this group? Let's say YouTube example is focus on what you have. Some aspect of business not working, but other aspect will be doing extraordinarily well. So, Groupon is one example. Focus on the wins, try to expand on the wins. Cut your losses, even if you love your business idea, but don't waste just because you are emotionally involved. Don't spend money on the features which are losing you money. Follow the money. So that's another third idea we take off, where the business is to be profitable if it's going to survive, and throw the hypotheticals and ideals out of the window and instead focus on where you can generate the most revenue. So these are the key points. So finally, I think I do have to talk about what lean startup methodology does not address. That doesn't mean it does. What it addresses very well. But as an entrepreneur, you have to keep an eye out for these kinds of challenges. It encourages agnostic experimentation instead of a compelling strategy. So that doesn't mean you throw strategy to the wings, but you have to work out strategy parallelly. But you can't let the strategy come once you have identified the product MVP and your product market and the customer needs. The strategy should not be in contradiction to that. So either you pivot and then fall in line with your strategy, or the strategy has to change. Second change will be failing fast. So learning is equally important, that, as important as failing. So failing fast doesn't mean you keep failing, but the thing is you can fail, but how much of learning you incorporate well into the next cycle is important, and you can't afford to fail too many times. Then a third challenge is lean startup will lead to incremental products. So it means you'll suddenly not improve the product. There'll be incremental improvements only to the product on every build, measure, learn cycle. Obviously, testing it in a test market, that is okay, but that also means it requires some patience and commitment and speed. And another short-sighted focus, you may say, is the lean startup emphasizes on product over deliberate growth. So there are other aspects of strategy and deliberate growth you may like to bring in, but till the product is market ready and you scale up, you can't bring in this feature. So it doesn't consider the product fit in a large and fast growing market segment. So if your speed of iteration and learning fast is not as fast as the market growth, then you stand to lose something in the market. So final words is lean startup, this kind of concept did unravel the mysteries of entrepreneurship and product development. And it also says that it's not magic and genius which make a successful startup, but a scientific process which can be learned and replicated in true spirit, and is totally focused on customer need, what customers willing to pay. So that's the key difference between the traditional product development and the lean methodology. So I think I'll stop here, and you have my contacts at the end of the screen. You can note down. You can reach me out on email.